at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences in beautiful downtown Raleigh. It's Science Tonight. Now here's your host, Chris Smith.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Science Tonight. I am your host, Chris. Thanks for being here. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of Science Tonight, where we meet interesting people making discoveries in science, technology, engineering, mathematics, all over the place. It's great doing the show here on YouTube and on Facebook, bringing the show to you live from the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences, or rather I should say because this is not the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences, but this is as close as I can get to it right now. See, because it's just right there. It's just right behind me. No, nobody laughed at that joke anyway. Welcome to the program. Listen, I'm glad that you're here because we've got a great show set up for you tonight. If you like birds, and who doesn't like birds, okay, then you're going to love tonight's show because we're going to be meeting an avian cognition expert and somebody very much concerned about the welfare of birds in captivity, somebody who's doing the science in order to improve the lives of birds everywhere, but in particular, a special group of birds, parrots. Let me introduce everybody to Holly Starenchak. Holly is a research assistant and a lifelong parrot owner who got started working with animals, it seems, as a veterinary technician, but then has moved on to study avian cognition at North Carolina State University and applying that to their welfare. And Holly, I understand, will be moving into a PhD program at the University of Alberta very soon, which sounds very exciting. And perhaps the gold star on an already great resume of research and animal care is that Holly once worked with us at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences as a curator of veterinary services. I won't put Holly on the spot to agree with that necessarily, but Holly, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for agreeing to be on Science Tonight and chat with me and all of our viewers about the research that you do.
Yeah.
I'm excited to learn a little bit more. And I see over your shoulder, I'm guessing that's a perch for a parrot.
Yes. So my Congo African Gray Lewis, if she feels like joining us at the end of the show, we're going to see if she wants to come up and hang out with us so you guys can meet her.
Well, that's reason enough for everybody to stick around until the end of the show, just for the chance. Well, to get started, the way that the show goes, if you've tuned in before, you know this. But Holly, the way we start is we play a little game first. It loosens things up a little bit, gives folks the opportunity to get to know you a little bit better by answering some trivia questions about something that I'm guessing you might know a lot, but that you don't know very much about. And it has nothing to do with your area of expertise. I got a nervous laugh, like an, oh no, what's Chris doing? So, are you up for it?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. So, I thought you're an expert in parrots. And what's the one thing that people associate most with parrots? It's pirates, particularly, right, like old school pirates, 18th century pirates. But North Carolina also has a very strong connection to pirates, in particular, one notorious pirate, Blackbeard. So I've prepared 3 questions about pirates, and in particular, Blackbeard.
Oh, goodness.
Ready to play?
Oh, yeah.
Do you feel like you know much about pirates?
No, not at all.
Okay. Well, let's see how you do. Just so everybody knows, and 2 out of 3, Science Tonight Hall of Fame will put you on the wall. Get all the questions wrong, though. 0 out of 3, and it's the Science Tonight Hall of Shame. But I think you're going to be great. Here we go. Here's your first question. What was the real name of the notorious pirate Blackbeard? Was it A, Edward Teach, B, Jack Sparrow, or C, Stede Bonnet?
Oh, well, B kind of feels like a trick. I'm going to go with C.
You're going to say C, Stede Bonnet? The correct answer is,
Ah.
oh, it's Edward Teach.
Not even close.
Edward teaches it, sometimes known as Edward Thatch. Depends on which historian you ask. Anyway, okay. Missed that one. Don't worry. There's 2 more questions. Here's the next one. Blackbeard's prized flagship, Queen Anne's Revenge, sank off the North Carolina coast. How? Did it sink in battle? Did it run aground? Or was it sunk to create an artificial reef for conservation?
I like that answer, but I don't think that's what happened to it. Gosh. I'm going to say that it sank in battle.
I think the big, awesome flagship sank in battle. Topsail, it's underwater right now, just off Topsail Island, right off of Topsail. And the Barrier Island ecology of North Carolina is notorious for taking ships because those sandy shoals are just all over the place. But all that being said, do you want to stick with your answer?
Oh, okay. I don't know. I'm going to stick with my answer, I guess.
All right, you're saying it sank in battle. The correct answer is it did run aground.
Yeah.
It did run aground. Yeah, some historians think that Blackbeard actually sank the ship on purpose, drove it into the Barrier Islands in order to sink it for all kinds of different reasons that seem to be in dispute, but was not in battle. 6 months later, he would meet his end, but it wasn't off Topsail. Okay, you got 1 more. We'll see how you do. You can still avoid the Hall of Shame. Of course, it's not very shameful anyway. All right, here we go. Which of these pirate tropes do experts say was absolutely based on real truths? The peg leg, the eye patch, or the pet parrot?
Well, considering I'm here to talk about parrots, I'm going to guess that it might be the pet parrot.
The pet parrot is actually already on screen. So I didn't even realize that I had advanced it. Yes, it
that
is
was
the
my
pet
guess
parrot.
Anyway, so.
Well, there was a perfect guess. Yes, it is in fact the pet parrot. I was reading up about this, and because these 18th century pirates were moving between North and South America and the islands in the Caribbean, they would often move parrots around. And so you would often see pirates at ports trying to sell pet parrots, which, as I understand it, is maybe not pet pirate parrots, but pet parrots is an area of research that you're interested in. Is that right?
Yes, very much so.
Well, you got 1 out of 3. So you've avoided the Hall of Shame, which basically means you're a winner at Science Tonight. Okay, thanks. Thank you for indulging me on the game.
Yeah.
Fantastic job. I do think that the pet parrot thing is pretty interesting, because how would a pirate on a ship on the ocean be able to provide the kind of care that a parrot would need? Of course, I kind of think, why would pirates weren't nice people? They're not taking good care of these animals anyway. Yeah. But
I mean, that's a great question.
Yeah.
For if they were traveling with the parrots, they would probably have the food source, that they got in the tropics and take it with them. But they can eat just about anything you give them. Not that it's going to be healthy for them, but.
There you go, everybody. There's your pirate insight from an avian cognition expert. Well, okay, so let's talk more about what I know that you know a lot about, which is parrot cognition and just how actually smart these animals really are. So to get started, can you give us an idea of what your research is and what got you interested in studying parrots?
Right. So like a lot of scientists, my interest started when I was a child. I started working with birds at a very young age. I got my first cockatiel at age 7, and that was kind of it. And I fell in love with parrots, and I fostered and worked with all different types of parrots and was immediately drawn by how intelligent and emotional they are, and really how little we knew about taking good care of them. And so I initially went to vet tech school and wanted to be an exotic vet tech, but realized that my interests lie more in research, and I really wanted to make a big difference in how people keep these animals in captivity. So I attended North Carolina State University for my bachelor's in zoology as well as in psychology. And there I did honors research at the North Carolina Zoo in the aviary. And I looked at the behavior of one group of parrots, the blue crown hanging parrots, who they have a large group of, versus the eclectus parrot, who, if you've ever been to the aviary, it's that bright red, beautiful bird in the aviary everyone goes to see. And I looked at how their behavior differed based on being in a social group versus being alone, because we know that parrots are very social and they're not always kept in their social groups in captivity. So my goal there was really understanding how we can change their captive keeping to improve their welfare. And I went on and continued to work in research labs, and then ended up back at NC State for my master's degree, where I am currently studying avian cognition and how the recent findings and how intelligent these birds are impact their welfare. And luckily, my research was not impacted by COVID because it's all pretty much online. So I've been lucky in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. Doing the research from home.
Yeah.
So now you mentioned having a pet parrot. Does that mean that your research is just taking notes on what your birds do?
You know, it's funny. It's not actually my research, but it is a really great deal of, or gives me a great deal of inspiration. I absorb the things that they do and the ways they interact with their environment and the things they learn. And I have this notebook of ideas for studies when I'm in a better position to do so, because they're so incredibly intelligent and they interact with their environment in amazing ways. And I think we can do a lot more for them. And so.
Yeah, absolutely. So give me a sense then, how smart are parrots?
So if you asked that question 50 years ago, you would get from many scientists that birds are dumb. They just act on instinct. If you look at a parrot's brain, it's smooth. And for a very long time, scientists thought that in order to be intelligent like primates and whales and humans, brains had to have the sulci and gyri, which are the ridges, which give it a lot of surface area. Well, very recent research has shown that their brains actually have comparable number of neurons to primates, and that their brains are designed for flight. So they're designed to be lightweight and compact, but highly intelligent and capable of high levels of cognition. So within the last 30 years, there have been a very large increase. There has been a very large increase in studies done showing that these parrots have the intelligence of a 3 to 4 year old human child. And they often solve problems based on logic and sociality better than sometimes than human children do. So very intelligent indeed.
So they're as smart as young humans.
Yeah, absolutely.
Although, you know, that reminds me, I used to be a primate keeper, and working with primates, which are thought of to be pretty smart because they're so closely related, you know, to the smartest, us, to humans. They would often do things that were definitely smarter than we thought. And by that, I mean, you would set up an enrichment activity for them to do, or a manner of feeding them, or a manner of keeping them. And then they would always break whatever it is you had set up. They always knew the way around, because we always thought, okay, they'll go from A to B to C, and they always go BAC. Mm-hmm. We're not, and then the next time they go CBA.
Yep.
And just to think about how smart so many animals are, and that we've never really taken them into serious consideration until recently.
Yeah.
So how does your work sort of get at that, or help us understand just how intelligent these birds are?
A lot of it is that unlike other animals kept as pets, like dogs and cats, these animals are not domesticated. They are a few generations removed from the wild. Some of them were actually wild collected because they lived for a very long time. So what I do is try to understand their wild behaviors, what they would do in the wild, and then look at how the cognition studies have been done over the last 20 years, and then use both of those things to apply that to their welfare. And the more we do that, the more we figure out that in captivity, we're taking away their ability to do what they do in the wild. We're taking away their ability to be in their social groups, or to fly, or to eat the foods they were meant to eat, or to have choices. And the more we incorporate those back into their lives in captivity, the better they do, the longer they live, and the less stress behaviors they have.
I'll remind everybody who's watching as we go throughout the program, leave your questions and comments over in the chat. In a few minutes, I'll be grabbing those and posing them to Holly a little bit later in the conversation. So stick around and get your questions answered. So Holly, you mentioned early that you've been around parrots and studying parrots for a long time, but how did you get started? Like, what's the story in your interest?
So I think I was about 5 or 6 years old, and my father and I found a baby robin. Now we know that you should, not hand raise it yourself. You should take it to a wildlife rescue, but this was over 20 years ago. And so we hand raised it, and watching how this bird grew and then became attached to us, and we'd let it go to fly away and it would come right back. I thought that was just the coolest thing ever. Of course, we eventually figured out you didn't want to do that. But I got my first pet cockatiel when I was 7, and I started hand raising them, and I started reading about them and just figuring out, watching the way they behaved. I ended up getting another cockatiel, and the way they behaved together. And when I was 17, I started working at a pet store that had a scarlet macaw, an African gray, these big parrots. And I always heard that, parrots can talk, and that's really cool or whatever, but these parrots didn't just copy what you said back to them. They had a sense of timing. They would make jokes. They would laugh. They would call mean people in the store bad names, and no one ever told them to do any of that. They just picked that up on context. And I just thought that was amazing. And then, learning that parrots and birds are the living relatives of dinosaurs, and that we have feathered dinosaurs in our living rooms that use human language is just, I was like, this is all I want to do with my life. So.
Yeah. Yeah. A dinosaur in your living room that can communicate with humans using their language.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. Although I don't know, do you ever run into birds that are just too smart?
Yeah, sometimes I feel like if you ask anyone with a parrot if their bird is too smart for their own good, or for the captivity they're in, it's usually yes. If you leave their lock just the slightest bit down where they can reach it, they're like, oh, okay, got that, and they'll unlock their cage and they'll be out and they'll have eaten everything in their room. Or I have a Google Home, and my African gray will activate it and change the color of the lights and turn music on. And I had a pet sitter once, and he came in and the music was playing, and he was like, what's going on? I said, oh yeah, she does that.
Your parrot changed the lights, turned on some music. It was just like the whole vibe here is off. I'm going to change some things.
Yeah, and you come down and she's actually dancing to the music. She's like dancing, and she'll move her wings, and sometimes she'll sing with it. And I never taught her how to do that. She watches me interact with the Google and goes, oh, I can do that. Mm-hmm. And if you YouTube parrots interacting with Alexa, there are just lots of videos of that. So
that's really impressive. So what are some of the ways that researchers and scientists try to answer these questions? Like, how do you use science to understand parrot intelligence and what they're going through in a captive setting?
Yeah. So one of the more ecological approaches is to watch them in the wild, to go into the wild and observe their behavior and see the way they interact with their environment and kind of the environment they've evolved for. Unfortunately, that's becoming more and more difficult because there are rapidly diminishing populations. In some parts of Africa, there's only 1% of the species left, of the African greys that are naturally there left. And so studying them in the wild is becoming a difficult thing to do. So a lot of scientists do keep their parrots in captivity in a lab, and they run psychological tests and behavioral tests that are all done on children as well, or humans. Things such as the cup test, where you put like a nut under 3 cups and move it around and see if they can figure out where it is. Tests looking at their ability to add numbers together, subtract numbers. Really just tests that you do in the lab that look at their cognitive abilities and measure them in a measurable way that really shows what they can do. I do know that recently they've been doing more tests with optical illusions and trying to understand if they can sense computer screens in the way that we do, or things like that. So
yeah, okay, that's the frontiers then. They can interact with the Google Home, and if we find out that they can interact with computer screens, we might be done for.
Yeah.
Just that we're bigger, is that the only thing that makes us better?
Yeah, their little hands kind of work like thumbs too, so we don't even have that over
them. we don't even have thumbs. The one human claim to fame. So I love the NC Zoo. I love to rep the NC Zoo anytime that I can. Tell me a little bit about the work that you were doing there, looking at groups of birds versus the one solitary bird.
Right. So I spent hundreds of hours in the North Carolina Zoo collecting all kinds of data, looking at how the birds foraged at the time, if people interact, if the people being there or the guests being there impacted them. And with all of that data, I decided to just look at the parrots. So they have the group of blue crown hanging parrots, about 7 of those. And then they have the one female Solomon Island eclectus, who is named Princess. You didn't know that. And what I observed is that the blue crown hanging parrots typically spent, if they foraged, they all went to the forager together, because birds are social. Eating, just like in humans, is a very social activity. So they would all go to the forager together. They would eat. They spent less time on the forager. They spent more time foraging on plants and actually eating natural things. While Princess, who is the singly housed parrot, she would spend a lot of her day sitting on the forager and kind of scared all the other birds off because she was so much bigger than them. And I never saw her forage on anything other than just food, which is abnormal for a bird who would be normally, eating fruit off plants. The other thing I noticed that I really wasn't able to put into my research, but was just kind of more of an observation, is that Princess had favorite keepers, and that when they would come into the exhibit, she would fly above them and talk and squawk and try to get their attention, but she didn't really seem interested in the other birds. She was more interested in her favorite people. Now, as keepers, you kind of don't want to do that. You want them to engage in their natural behaviors, but you have this issue where she was singly housed. And so I was trying to apply how we could maybe incorporate another large parrot into the exhibit to allow her to engage with her own species as opposed to trying to get human interaction.
Very, very interesting. When I think of people keeping pet parrots, I really do often think of, somebody with just a single bird.
Mm-hmm.
But you've mentioned that they live in groups in the wild.
Yeah.
There? Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and show a picture. Let me see if you guys can see that. So,
excellent.
Right here we have a picture of African greys in the wild, and you see this flock is huge. They're very social. You can see all of them together. This picture is not very happy. These ones are being wild collected. But in captivity, we typically have one bird with a person. And I'm going to go ahead. Well, I'm going to go ahead and show you the next slide that I have on here too. And so we have these singly housed parrots in completely unnatural environments. And here's one of the side effects we get from keeping these parrots in captivity. And it is a self-mutilation behavior. And it's not very fun to look at. And it's not very fun to live with a bird that does this, because if you do really care about your bird, you want to, improve their welfare so that they don't do this. But this is a very common behavior that we see in captivity that does not exist in the wild. Parrots do not pull their feathers in the wild. It is something that occurs in captivity, which is similar to some human mental illnesses. And I think one of the big problems is that we do keep these extremely social animals isolated. Even if they do have a good bond with their human, in non-COVID times, most people are out of the house 8 to 10 hours a day. Well, parrots are never alone in the wild. And that really needs to be considered moving forward, and keeping them in captivity as that they should be in their social groups.
So what do you think are some ways for people to, if they're keeping pet parrots, to improve the life of that animal?
Yeah.
If they're, I mean, if they're here watching this, I believe that they're concerned. They want to know more.
Absolutely. There's so much you can do for your birds, and so many different species of birds. They all come from different parts of the world. They have different requirements. So one of the base things that you can do without any money and really little effort is to read about the type of bird you have and what it does in the wild. What type of food does it eat? What type of climate does it have? What type of social group is it in? And once you know that, you can apply that to how you keep them. Maybe they're used to getting showers 3 times a week and you've only been giving them 1 time a week. Increase that. Maybe you see that they eat more citrus fruits, and then, oh, I didn't realize that. And then you start incorporating that. I definitely think if you have the ability to keep more than one of the same animal, you should absolutely keep at least 2 of the same species, even if they aren't in the same cage. Just being able to interact with each other. There have been studies that show that just hearing another bird of the same species reduces these behaviors. Another really big thing I think is important is giving your bird choice. It's something that a lot of people would never even consider. But in the wild, birds have total choice over their day-to-day lives. Well, in captivity, they're typically in a cage. It's closed. They're allowed out once a day. Open your bird's cage and say, hey, if you want to come out, I'm here. If not, whatever. And let them do what they want. That's dangerous with some types of birds, like cockatoos, who will destroy anything wood in your house. But if you have a bird that you can trust to do that, definitely give them opportunities to make their own choices. And again, that's something that doesn't cost a lot of money. It's just giving your bird, empowering them to make choices.
Because they're smart enough to figure it out.
Yes, they are.
How do parrots stack up against other kinds of birds that I see a lot in like news stories and see videos online? Like crows come to mind as one that recently has really skyrocketed in notoriety for being really smart.
Yeah, I would say that corvids, so crows and jays, and parrots are on the same level of intelligence. They're both very highly intelligent. They both evolved for different environments, so some of their abilities are different, and parrots obviously have that amazing vocal ability, which, you know, why can they do that and other species of birds can't? We don't know yet, but the largest brain to body ratio of any non-human animal comes from a hyacinth macaw. And the standard of understanding how intelligent an animal is was typically the brain to body ratio. And hyacinths have the largest one. So if we're just going on that standard, they might just be the most intelligent.
Oh, wow. I had never heard that. Mm-hmm. That's really impressive. So what are some of the other behaviors that you see in wild birds that people could incorporate, or that you look at and try to compare to captive settings in order to improve welfare?
Yeah, of course. Foraging is one behavior that can be incorporated into captive keepings that birds do all the time. Parrots in the wild do not get a bowl of birdseed or bowl of pellets and then they eat and then leave. They spend their entire day searching for food, opening shells, working very hard for their food. And by incorporating as much of that into captivity as possible, you give them more things to do, and more of their natural behaviors are met. Another big one that kind of rides on sociality is that birds are loud. People say, you know, what kind of bird can I get that won't scream or won't make noise? If you want an animal that doesn't make noise, a parrot is not for you. They have evolved to be very, very loud and to scream across the jungle, to talk to each other and tell them what's going on. So if you want a bird, get used to kind of having contact calls and yelling with your bird. It's a behavior that's natural for them and it's fun for them. And if you teach a bird to sing or to say something you like as opposed to a scream, you'll engage better with it. And finally, probably the most important behavior that parrots get in the wild that they do not get in captivity is flight. In the last 20 years, the avian veterinarians have gone from clipping all birds' wings to going, we shouldn't be doing this unless it's absolutely necessary. Birds fly for miles every day, and birds in captivity rarely fly at all, maybe from one wing to another. There has been a big push by some people who keep captive birds of training their birds to free fly. They take them outside and they have a call and response. Now that scares me. But I think if you can train your bird to do that, that's one of the best things, perhaps the best thing you could do for your captive bird.
Fresh air and good exercise, right?
Same as in people. If you don't exercise, you get depressed. So
same as with us. That's amazing. Okay, now you said something that's got me curious. What about parrots' vocabulary, vocal repertoire? They're well known for being able to, I don't want to say mimic human speech, but because you said they're not mimicking. So how great is their vocal ability?
So something that interests people is the reason that parrots and then birds can imitate human speech, but things like primates cannot, is because parrots have something called a syrinx, which is a voice box that moves in all directions. So they can mimic pretty much any sound they hear, even beyond human speech. And the reason why this has evolved is still very much in question, something that I'm very interested in trying to figure out. But, why parrots like the Congo African gray can learn hundreds of words and why other species of parrots maybe learn 10 is, again, something that we just don't know yet. But it does have a lot to do with their sociality and the fact that they live in very complex, changing tropical environments. And having these very hard environments is what challenges their brains to be more more able to adapt. And for some reason, vocal ability is extremely necessary to them, but it's not something we fully understand yet.
Is there a limit to that?
That's a good question. Now, we typically say that humans are different from other animals in that we have this seemingly unlimited range. And again, we don't know why humans are capable of that, but we don't know the full capability of parrots. The more research we do, the more the line is drawn here, we do another study and go, oh, the line's actually up here. And I don't know if there's really a limit. I know that from personal experience, my African gray, Lewis, she doesn't just say the same words over and over again. She will take words out of one sentence and move them around and change them. And she changes what she says all the time based on whatever's going on in the environment. I got a kitten the last few months, and she learned how to call that kitten and then tell it to go on and get out of here. And I never taught her to do that. She just picked that up. And again, it's that social learning where we as a species use our words a lot, and the birds are with us and they're like, well, if I'm going to interact with this human, I better learn how to speak to it. So.
Are there any really impressive examples of research projects or birds under study that were just, I'm imagining that there are like A+ students, and then there are, maybe some B- students.
Yeah, that's the thing about working with parrots is that it's not really like, hey, we're going to go in the lab today and we're going to do this research. It's like, hey, do you want to do this work today? And if they're like, yeah, cool, I'm going to do it, and they interact with you, great. If they go in and they're not in the mood, you're not going to get any work done. So there are tons of them, just amazing studies, both that are done in labs and then also ones that have been done with parrots in households. So as opposed to keeping parrots in labs, which used to be the gold standard, but I'm hoping moving forward that we can use the birds that are in sanctuaries, that are in homes, because we have plenty of them, and they're just as smart as the birds in the lab. There's a woman who has done a study showing that her cockatoo can use a tablet. So cockatoos aren't particularly known for their vocal ability. They are very playful. They are known for creating and using toys and tools, but they aren't very vocal. But she uses a tablet, just a computer tablet, and has taught her bird to communicate on the tablet, much like a nonverbal human would, by saying, I want seed, I want music, I want this or that. And the study they did showed that when it would select a seed, that's what it would go for. It didn't say, go for seed ball and then go for the apple. It actually knew what it was saying and what it was going for. And they're trying to repeat that study with other parrots and different species, and trying to see, how far this actually goes. So I really think that's a great study. It also keeps the birds busy. She posts videos of her parrots drawing on the tablets and keeps them quiet and keeps them busy. So.
Playing on the tablets.
Yep.
I know that folks train their birds to talk. Can you train a parrot to do lots of other things?
Absolutely. So that's another one of the studies that recently came out. They had 2 African gray parrots. Let me find it really quick. I have a picture of it for you guys. I'm going to share it real quick.
Excellent.
The study is right here in this bottom corner. So they have 1 African gray on this side and 1 on this side. And what happens is these little tokens here get the bird treats. So they give treats for a token. Now, one bird has all the tokens and the other bird doesn't have any. This bird spontaneously shared his token with the other bird so that this bird, who doesn't have any tokens, could get a treat without any reward. So, there was a little bit of training that was involved in the study. This bird over here spontaneously shared just so that his little companion over here could eat as well. So they think that shows altruistic behavior, and again comes back to that sociality. But they have all kinds of, these are all parrots that are in research studies. This is Alex, perhaps one of the most famous African grays, and all of the different ways they can manipulate objects and with their feet and their hands. So you can train birds to do just about anything.
Oh wow, that's so cool. And so the ones in the photos were doing research studies. Was Alex playing with numbers there?
Yes. So this top picture, I can show it to you guys again real quickly so we can talk about this study. Alex was part of just so many wonderful studies that I cannot even begin to mention them now. So what Dr. Pepperberg would do is say, what number green, or what color 2? And he would look at this board, and if she said, what color 2, he would look at this board and say green. And so this showed not only his ability to identify colors, but also to identify numbers and to kind of understand what he was being asked. And again, there are so many studies. Alex lived for about 30 years, and he really changed animal cognition research for forever. Before him, they said that birds couldn't do any of this, and yeah, they can.
Way to go, Alex.
Mm-hmm.
You said Alex lived 30 years. Is that average for an African gray?
It's actually kind of short.
Oh, wow.
Parrots can live anywhere from 60 to 100 years, which is part of the reason I'm so passionate about improving their welfare, is because they live a long time. Alex unfortunately passed away from one of the most common things that parrots pass away from, is arterial sclerosis, from poor diet and lack of exercise, because back in the 70s, they were feeding birds seeds because we didn't know any better. And, they clipped their wings because we didn't know any better. But the more we know about how important diet and exercise is to people, just as in humans, we can expect to see these African greys can live 60 years in captivity easily.
60 to 100 years.
Yeah. Some of the bigger macaws can live over 100 years.
Oh my gosh, more than 100 years. So So if an adult goes out and says, I would like to have a pet parrot, like that bird is going to go in your will.
Absolutely. Yes, they do. They need to be willed. And unfortunately, that's kind of a crisis we have in captive parrots, is that people don't realize they live so long. Or perhaps, and they're like, what do I do now? Or they move, or life experience, life changes and you can't keep this bird. And unfortunately, sometimes, they end up in basements, they end up in closets, they end up in drawers. I've read pretty horrible situations because they are willed and the kids children are like, I don't want this bird. But there are a lot of parrot only rehoming organizations in the country, and they're kind of full. So yeah.
Wow. All right, folks, looking at the clock, go ahead and start dropping more questions. There's already several questions that have come up in the chat, but any thoughts that you've got, let me know. And I'm going to start grabbing some of what's going on here and throw your way, Holly, if that's all right.
Sounds good.
So the first one I've got here comes from Hank and Denise. Hey, y'all, thanks for watching. Do parrots accept other animals as companions?
So yes, absolutely. I mean, they consider us our companions in captivity. Whether or not it's an appropriate or a complete replacement for having their own species is debatable. Definitely something that needs more research. But there are some pretty remarkable videos of parrots interacting with other animals, with their dogs. Cats and dogs can be a little bit dangerous because the way they play can just accidentally kill a parrot. But they definitely can interact with other animals.
All right. The next one. Is the feather pulling problem just psychological, or could it be made worse by poor nutrition?
So both. There has been quite a bit of research because it's been a behavior that we've seen for a long time and people want to help. So there is definitely a psychological aspect to it, but it can totally be made worse or even caused by medical issues. Poor diet is definitely an example. Lack of exercise, boredom. Sometimes they say if you have a bird who is fully feathered and then all of a sudden starts plucking one area, it needs to go to the vet because it's probably in pain in that one area. So it isn't always a sign of anxiety, but any new changes in your bird behavior warrants a vet visit. So always roll out the medical first.
All right. Erla is asking, are most captive parrots and other captive birds raised in captivity, or are they caught in the wild?
So luckily, we have CITES, which is an organization and a law that a treaty between many different countries that has made capturing wild birds illegal in the countries that are in CITES. So in America, if you have a pet bird, it is supposed to be reared in captivity. However, CITES only came in around 1970, 1980. And like I said, parrots can live 60 years. So there are parrots in captivity who were wild collected. They cannot be returned to the wild because they would not survive. And unfortunately, there are a lot of parts in the country that still do capture wild birds. And it's definitely something that needs more education and needs a lot of change in the way that these birds are taken from the wild, because if we don't stop, they're not going to survive in the wild much longer. But hopefully, if you have a pet bird in America, it was bred in captivity.
Are there very many parrot species that are, say, on endangered species lists or threatened lists?
Parrots are actually the most endangered species of bird. They are, here's Lewis. She might behave for us.
Hi, Lewis.
African greys, like this one, are CITES 1 listed, critically endangered. As I mentioned, 1% of the population in some African forests and rapidly decreasing. Yeah, in not only capture for the pet trade, but also deforestation and loss of habitat. But there's a good chance in the next 20 years, many parrots of species will be extinct in the wild.
Wow. All right, let me get some more questions here for you. Penelope wants to know if parrots have this ability to speak and they are descended from dinosaurs. Do you think some dinosaurs could have had the same vocal ability?
That is a really great question.
That's a great question.
It is. You know, we don't know because we don't know when this ability evolved. When did it come into their physiology? The more we know about dinosaurs, the more we realize that they did have feathers and they were brightly colored, and they probably did, engage in care of their offspring, which when I was a child, they said dinosaurs didn't care about their kids or their offspring, or, and there's a good chance that they probably had higher levels of cognitive abilities. But if we will ever know that, I'm not sure, but it is totally possible.
I like to think that they didn't, because thinking about dinosaurs, non-avian dinosaurs, I guess, being able to like yell at you as they chase you, I don't know.
It's a little scary, yeah.
Especially since modern day birds, right, are descended from theropods, which were the big like bipedal meat eaters.
Yeah.
So they would be screaming at you
while trying to eat you. Yeah.
Yeah, they'd be carrying on a conversation while they ate you. That sounds less fun. All right. Hi, Lewis. I just want to say hi, Lewis.
Lewis is eating a pecan. Say hi, Lewis. She knows we're on camera and she will not talk.
Perfectly fine. Perfectly fine.
As long as she sits there and behaves, we're okay.
I'm just glad we have a chance to meet Lewis.
Yeah.
All right, let's see here. Next question for you. Do parrots in the wild use their voices for mimicking other animals?
Yes. Yeah. Unfortunately, there are very few studies of wild parrot, especially African gray behavior, because it can actually be very dangerous to study these parrots in the wild, because poachers see this as their livelihood and they see parrot researchers as a threat. And there have been stories of people being chased out of the rainforest and actually being killed because of where they are and trying to study the parrots. But there have been some really cool studies showing that African grays will in one recording, they found that they mimicked 200 different sounds in a single night. And I believe it was something like 20 other species of birds and a couple species of bats. So they do mimic their environment. And again, what the purpose of this is, are they just doing it because it's fun? Are they talking to each other about what they saw during the day? We don't know, but they are absolutely capable of it, and they do mimic sounds in the wild.
Gosh, the more I learn about these animals, the more impressed I am.
Yeah.
All right, next question here for you. Is adoption and rescue as much of an issue for birds as it is for cats and dogs?
Yes, absolutely. And a big thing that I'm really pushing for is to really limit the number of birds that are bred in captivity. I truly don't believe that we need to be breeding hundreds, if not thousands of birds, when there are hundreds of thousands of birds in sanctuaries and rehoming that need new homes. There's a wonderful organization called Phoenix Landing around Asheville, North Carolina, that has a wonderful education program as well as a fostering and adoption program. And the reason I like them so much is because they ensure that the parrot has a home for life. So as I said, these birds can live 80 to 100 years. When it's time to find that bird a new home, when it's time to find that bird a new home, Phoenix Landing will always make sure that bird has a home. And that's something that we need to see happen, because yes, dogs and cats also need new homes, but 15 years versus 60 years is, 1 or 2 homes versus 4 or 5.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of our viewers was asking if you could share, or if you knew of any organizations that help with life planning for parrots.
Yeah.
They write that they have an African gray that's about 30 years old and is likely going to outlive them.
Yeah. I strongly recommend Phoenix Landing. I think they are a wonderful organization. they always need support and volunteers and however you choose to give support, but they do wonderful things for birds and make sure that they have a good home for the rest of their lives. I actually adopted my other African gray from Phoenix Landing. So.
Jennifer's got an interesting question, and is curious about the rules around owning an animal that can live so long.
Yeah.
Is it legal to adopt an animal whose natural healthy lifespan is so long? Would love to hear what you think.
That's
like
a big
parrots
part
do require life planning.
Yeah, that's a big part of why I switched from veterinary medicine to, oh, you dancing? Oh, she's dancing back there. She's distracting me. A big part of why I switched from veterinary medicine into research is because when I realized there are essentially no laws protecting these animals. If you go on the internet, you can buy, and it's not just parrots, it's all exotic animals. You can go online and you can buy a monkey, you can buy a fennec fox, you can buy endangered species of tree frogs. You can buy a parrot that lives 120 years with absolutely no regulation, no proof that you can take care of it, nothing. And unfortunately, a lot of the times until this comes into people's consciousness or they become aware of it, laws don't change. Just as we saw, everybody knows about Tiger King, people didn't realize that tigers are being bred just for the babies and then who knows what happens to the adults. And now there is new legislation going through the Senate trying to prevent this from happening. And a big goal of mine is to educate people and let them know that I love my birds and I don't think no one should be allowed to keep birds. I think that if you take good care of your birds and you have a good home for them and you do the best you can, you should be able to keep your birds. But there needs to be regulations in place because there are a lot of suffering birds. And they are so intelligent and so long-lived that they deserve a lot better.
Excellent. All right. Lydia is asking, how has the government helped with stopping the extinction of the African gray?
So, as I mentioned, they are CITES 1 listed, which is the highest level of CITES you can have, and that just happened in 2017. So, being in CITES is wonderful. It is a treaty between a lot of countries who do not trade African grays. As I mentioned, or as Chris mentioned, that I am going to be moving to Canada to attend my PhD program, and taking my birds with me is kind of a nightmare. I have to apply for CITES permits, and I have to prove that I've owned them, and prove that I care for them, and prove all of this stuff. And it's like a 40-page document. And while it's awful, it's a lot of work, it's so that people do not continue to take these birds out of the wild and bring them here. So in that regard, regulations like CITES and excuse me, and not allowing people to bring them in and making it very difficult to move them does help. But it's just that once they're here, there are no rules about how we keep them.
Excellent, excellent. So let me see what else we're talking about over here in the chat with the few minutes we have left. Glenn has written, my blue and gold macaw will laugh at funny things on the TV. I think he's cueing on the laugh track.
Yeah, sometimes they do cue into things and they learn the timing of things, but my African gray also laughs, and she'll laugh when the cat does something, or she'll laugh when you drop something, and you're like, are you just cueing in on it, or do you actually think that's funny? I don't know, but their sense of timing is pretty remarkable.
So yeah, maybe the blue and gold macaw just likes the jokes.
Yeah, she thinks they're funny.
Glenn, let me know what show, and we'll do an informal poll as to whether we think it's funny enough to laugh at, and then we can decide if your bird's sense of humor is on par. Let's see. Penelope also wrote earlier in the program, I met a person with a pet parrot that was allowed to fly freely around the house because he knew to only poop in his cage and would only go to his cage, and also would go to his cage when told to.
Yeah, they're, like I said, they're very, I don't want to say easy to train, because again, they have their own ideas of what they want to do, but they are extremely able to be trained. And potty training your birds is actually one of the easiest things you can do. They learn that when you say go potty, that they do that, and then you give them a treat and they're like, okay, cool. But I love to hear of birds being able to free fly. I think it's extremely important. And as long as it's safe in your house, it's always the best option.
All right, excellent. See, I'm getting distracted by
Yeah.
Lewis over there.
Yeah, every time we talk to, she'll like go woo and raise her wings and turn around. Yeah, Lewis knows a couple tricks. She knows turn around. She knows big wings, give me a kiss, and she'll dance and she'll wave. She won't do any of that for me now because she's like, what am I doing up here?
Right. We seem to be getting the cold shoulder.
Yeah. Actually, if a bird turns its back on you, it's kind of like giving you the middle finger. It's kind of a bird's way of saying, leave me alone. Yeah.
Lewis, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Don't hate me, Lewis. Okay, let's see here. I got one last story from one of our viewers. Lois writes, our African gray helped to raise our kids. She used to yell at my son, Terrence, you stink, get a bath. And to my daughter, you're late, you're going to miss your bus.
Yeah, it's true. Like I said, she likes to yell at the kitten to go on, get out of here. After she's called her in there. So they definitely learn the social and the family dynamics and know how to use their words in such a way that totally makes sense with the situation. And yeah.
So with the last couple of minutes that we've got, what's your advice for someone who's maybe thinking about getting a pet parrot, or probably let's do for someone who's maybe thinking about studying birds and cognition?
So for anyone thinking about getting a bird, I have two suggestions. One is to research some more and read stories about people who have the birds. A lot of people get a bird because of the way it looks. They go, oh, that bird's pretty, or oh, I heard that bird likes to be tickled or something. But the different parrot species are so different in their personality and the type of household they need that it's much better to get a bird based on its personality than how it's going to fit in your house based on how it looks. My second suggestion is to foster a bird first. Phoenix Landing offers a wonderful foster program where a bird comes into your house for 2 months. And after those 2 months, you can either adopt it, or if you're like, this bird isn't a good match for my family, can we try a different bird? I would love to still try to take a bird in. That is the way to go, because a lot of the times you don't know until you have them in your home and you're like, I can't deal with this bird's constant screaming, or this bird has a great personality, I love it. You just need to find out. And so for studying, anyone who wants to study or any type of animal cognition, I say definitely go for it. Some people are discouraged from certain types of research because there's not a lot of funding. But I think that there's a lot more to understanding the natural world than just going where funding is. And I think that you can learn so much about, not only just the birds themselves, but where they fit in other animals in the phylogenetic tree as they compare to humans, and getting experience with every type of animal possible, and every type of bird species or whatever you want to study is extremely helpful to figuring out what you actually want to do and then go for it. We need more people studying cognition in any regard. And there are programs and there are definitely places where you will be able to study what you love.
A question just popped up here and it's so good I've got to ask it.
Okay.
You said a bit ago it'd be cool to see household birds and sanctuary birds in scientific studies. Would this be similar to a citizen science project? Or, and I'll add, maybe, do you know of any ways that bird owners can find opportunities like that?
So that is definitely my goal going forward. As I go into my PhD and go forward, I will definitely be trying to incorporate more citizen science projects, like you said, where we do use birds in homes, and then the owners collect the data, and then we use that data to create, to come up with our answers and what we find out. And I'm not exactly sure the best ways to go about that now. You can always just Google parrot studies that I can be part of. I do know of a couple that are definitely in the preliminary stage. As I mentioned, the woman who studied her cockatoo using the tablet, they're looking at doing a study like that with a larger number of birds, as well as looking at their ability to add and subtract and their numerical abilities. And I don't know how far along that study is. It's very in the preliminary stage, but by Googling and by looking at certain universities, and if you follow me, I will definitely let you know if any of those studies come up, but I'm hoping that in the future that becomes more common.
Well, how can folks keep in touch with you or keep up with your research?
So the only thing I really have is an Instagram. I should be joining Science Twitter because everyone says I should, so I'll probably be doing that soon. But I do have an Instagram. It is Hoolybird, HOOLYBIRDD. And I post lots of pictures of my birds and talk about my research, and perhaps on Science Twitter in the near future.
All right, excellent. Well, there you go, everybody. Holly, thank you so much for doing this. Thanks for chatting with us about your research and your birds.
Yeah, thank you. I've had a great time and hope everybody learned something.
There's no way that they didn't learn something new and interesting in this one, because this has been great. We got to meet you. We got to meet Lewis. This was a great show. So again, thanks everybody. Hey, thanks for tuning in to tonight's episode. Of course, we'll be back here next Thursday at 7 o'clock with another edition of Science Tonight. Next week, we'll be talking with Ariana Eiley, Dr. Ariana Eiley, who's a faculty at the North Carolina School of Science and Math. We're going to be talking about bringing science and art together to communicate science to the public and beyond. It's going to be a great conversation. I think you're going to enjoy hearing from Ariana. So I'll see you here next Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern, on the museum's YouTube channel or on Facebook, wherever you like to watch. If you are on YouTube, though, you can subscribe to the museum's channel below and, of course, click the little bell to get notified. That way you'll know when we are bringing you more live science content out of the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. Hit up naturalsciences.org. Check out the calendar of events for more cool stuff that we've got going on. And as always, you can follow the museum on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, all three as @naturalsciences. Until next time, everybody, take care, stay safe out there, and be kind to your pet parrots. We'll see you again soon. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Holly.
Thank you.